Okay, good morning, everybody. Before we dive in, I've had a pretty good morning so far, chest day. I'm going down to the Hawaii Convention Center in town to go help with Hawaii Bicycling League today. That should be a lot of fun. Moreover, it's going to keep burning calories. Weighed in at a lovely 213 pounds on the dot after my workout this morning. We are 1 pound away from where we need to be in Tacoma, which is coming up in 1 week. So 1 pound a week, no problem. And then I am rather, sorry. Okay, this pencil is out of lead apparently. Okay, that's fine. 5 pounds away from where I want to be in a month in Miami. Yesterday was very, very much a grueling workout for heavy deadlifts, followed by hiking. Okay, I've been practicing this. Kaho'omoe Ihikapulani. That is a mountain in the Ko'olau range that you get to from hiking Tripler Ridge. Tripler is the famous big pink hospital that the Army and really all the armed forces use for medically necessary appointments and surgeries and all that for, I think the entire armed forces all pretty much use it. If it's typically just for Army, but if you're injured badly enough in your Navy or Air Force, they'll send you to Tripler. Anyway, ended up burning 5,200 calories and only eating 3,000 yesterday. And the truth is, I was supposed to fast for Lent. If I had not eaten a decent sized dinner, and by decent size, I only mean 1,800 calories, not that much, with some pasta, some chickpeas, some tuna. But if I had not done that, I would have been cramping up all night. I needed the carbs. I needed to replenish. So, sorry about that one. But anywho, I'm dialing in. The next few days are going to be tough, but let's dive in. This one needs to be said. Okay. This comes to you not quite as a consultation, but from advice I had gotten from a friend who was asking. Now, he had largely done the right thing in the sense of he had a general idea of why he wanted to go back to school. So credit to this guy. This rant is not really targeted at him. However, it inspired me because I've gotten questions about this before and we need to talk about this. Okay. Albert Einstein famously said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He that understands it will be a master of it. He that fails to understand it will be a slave to it, okay? You can love it, you can hate it, but that is how reality works. Almost everything financial, hell, that's what financing means, comes down to, will you pay the interest or will you receive the interest? This accounts for investing, right? Investing, in effect, it's not quite the same, but you're getting a dividend. The whole point of stocks, owning stocks is, yes, prices may go up, prices may go down, but in general, the underlying value of a stock is what they can pay out in a dividend. Now, some companies refuse to pay dividends, and as such, they will buy back stock instead, and there are a lot of investing reasons why that happens. We're not getting into that. The point is that in capitalism, you either borrow money and pay it back plus interest, or you lend money and you get interest from it, and eventually it gets paid back to you, provided that your debtor does not default. In general, it is a great mark of shame to default on your debt. That is a mark of fiscal irresponsibility. I feel very strongly about this because, one, I am a creditor, and two, I am very much debt averse. I do have some debt in the form of a mortgage. However, it's at a very low interest rate. I can pay it all back tomorrow if I wanted to, and it's productive debt. It is financing an asset, right? So I'm taking out debt in the form of a mortgage and using it to rent out my home for a positive cash flow. Let's talk about where I'm going with this. The biggest decision, short of getting married, you will make in your life in terms of setting up your life beyond about age 20 is your career choice, okay? What does that mean? Well, it means in general, you are going to choose one of two options at the age of 18. You're going to graduate high school and you're either going to A, go to college in some form or another, could be a 4-year degree, could be community college, could be a trade school, but some sort of post-high school education, or B, you're going to go straight into the working world. There are pros and cons to both approach. Unfortunately, and this is one I will lay largely at the feet of the baby boomer generation, we were fed, us millennials and Gen Z as well, we were fed pretty poor advice from the baby boomers. The advice being that you need to get a college degree to have a good career, and ew, don't go into the trades. Do you want to be a plumber all your life? There is nothing wrong with being a plumber, and in fact, plumbing is probably a better career in terms of return on investment than a lot of different degrees. Not every single degree, but in general, the trades are just fine. Not to mention the trades are one of the few things in the United States that are largely unionized, which means you have a much better chance of job stability. Okay, so let's get into this, okay? We're gonna use some basic generic math numbers, okay? So bear with me on this. You can adjust the numbers up or down to match your individual situation, okay? I cannot sit here and pull numbers for everyone out of thin air, right? Some people are gonna say, oh, those numbers are too low. Some people are gonna say, oh, those numbers are too high. I gotta go with something. So adjust the numbers as you see fit. The exercise here is to do the return on investment calculation. I've said this before. You need to do a return on investment to see, is this degree worth getting, okay? One last thing before we dive in. The term follow your passion is bullshit, okay? Get that out of your mind right now. If you do anything at all for 40 hours a week, I'd say there's a 99% chance that after a while you're going to get sick of it. You might, if you're one of those people that has truly found your passion and you're very happy working, congratulations. You are a very, very small minority. So that doesn't apply to you. As long as you're happy and you can make ends meet, do whatever the hell you want. Even then, what you may find enjoyable and passionate about at age 25 might start to wear thin by age 45. So you might still want to listen. The point here is very simple, okay? Return on investment of a degree is not just the cost of the degree. In economics, there's a term called opportunity cost. In other words, let's say you want to go and study full-time for a degree. Let's say it's a 4-year degree. You're not only sacrificing whatever you have to pay to get that degree. Most places, unless you get a scholarship, you're going to have to pay something. You are foregoing the wages at which you would get paid if you went and got a job in the working world instead of studying. Now, those wages might not be very high. However, if you are a high school graduate and you don't want to go to college, you could go the trades route. I would recommend it. There is a shortage of good tradesmen in this country. And that will dramatically start to increase your wages. Now, if you want to stick and work at McDonald's for the next 4 years, your wages are going to be pretty poor. You might get a raise here, you might get a raise there. But frankly, fast food jobs, while there's nothing wrong with them, or basic retail jobs, if you're good at that job, it's not unlikely or unheard of that you can't get into the management side of running the franchise, which at least will pay you something more, or you'll start networking with people in and out of the times you're working, and that should lead to other job opportunities. Not to mention, you could also try going for the online certifications route. If there's something, let's take the computer side or IT side. A lot of the time, a degree is no longer necessary. Depends on who you're talking to in terms of the working world. Some usually more legacy and older fashioned companies still demand a degree in computer science, but a lot of startups and a lot of tech companies don't, for instance. And I'm aware there's a tech recession right now, but you get what I'm talking about. A degree is not necessarily required to get yourself a decent paying job. Hell, right, there are also the jobs that are unattractive, but are still very much decent to work at, right? Nobody wants to work in municipal sewage systems, but you know what you get paid good to do? Work in municipal sewage systems, because as it turns out, nobody likes dealing with shit water. But if you can stomach it, it pays well. Same thing with garbage collecting, right? You get the idea. Or again, plumbing, you know, if you're underneath a house, you're in a crawl space, it's not enjoyable work, but it pays well as a result. Same with welding or a lot of other, again, blue collar jobs. There's no shame in a blue collar job. So let's dive into the actual math here. Let's say that we go with a degree, 4 years at $40,000 total. That's $10,000 a year. We're going to say maybe the first 2 years you go to a community college, cut your costs a little bit. You still go full time, but you're cutting your costs a little bit. And the cost of the degree, you're only doing 2 years at the big, you know, major school, right? Okay. And then let's say at income, you know, maybe you study part-time over the summer, or you take a few summer jobs and you make over that time span, you know, it won't be a lot, but $20,000, right? So off the bat, you're $20,000 in the hole, okay, for the cost of the degree. Now, you have to factor in the opportunity cost, all right? So an opportunity cost, let's just say at no degree, you're working full time. Let's say, right, most states, you're gonna have at least a minimum wage of $12 an hour. Here in Hawaii, it's 14. You know, in California, I think it's 15. In Washington, it's 15. In some states in the South, it's as low as $7.25. But hell, even in South Carolina, in my rural town where the minimum wage is $7.25, I saw no jobs advertising for below 10. So I think we can at least use, I think 12 is a pretty good average. Adjust it as you see fit. So we're going to start at 12 hours. You should be working 40 hours a week, or you can work 2 jobs, right? Or you can find a side hustle. There are plenty of options and ways to do that. But 12 hours a week times 40 weeks a year is going to be $28,000 in your first year. No, sorry, $24,000, excuse me. So it's going to be $24,000. Now, if you're good at what you do, it is likely that eventually you will either find another job or start working more hours at the same job and start to see better wages. So let's just go ahead and assume you're managing about a 5% raise every year, thereabouts, okay? So that'll be $25,000, $26,000, and let's say year 4, you know, you get a certification, you've been working on it in your spare time, right? Or something of that nature, and it bumps you up to, let's just say $30,000. I think that's pretty reasonable to go from $12 to $15 an hour in 4 years. That's very conservative, if anything. I would argue you could probably do a little bit better, especially, again, if you get a certification. If you're in the know, go for whatever you'd like there. So, where does this lead us? Well, and by the way, this $40,000 cost, and I should probably update that now I'm thinking about it, because that's not really even counting living. And, you know, you might be able to live at home, but tuition plus having to go out and work, realistically, you're probably looking at more like $50,000 to $60,000 over the course of 4 years. So we'll say minus $60,000. So it's $15,000 a year in the red. Let's say, you know, the first couple of years you're community colleging it, you're living at home with mom and dad, but then the last few years you're starting to go out on your own a little bit more. So, all right, what this means, and then let's go ahead, we got to apply ceteris paribus. So you're doing the same thing in these 2 years. So we'll say expenses are $10K a year for year 1, $10K a year for year 2, and then $20K a year for year 3 and 4, okay? So that's going to be plus 14K, plus 15K, plus 6K, and plus 10K. So that's going to be, you're going to be in the black if you've done things properly. And yeah, how do I live on $10,000 a year? Well, again, if you're living at home with mom and dad, you can economize on rent and food. Those will be the big ones. And then, right, if you're in your, you're going to be age 20 and 21 at this stage, right? So that's going to be, right, that's going to be, you're going to be in roommate territory at that point. You would be in college as well. So again, we're trying to keep it even. You'd be using roommates in college. That's a very normal thing to do. And if you're saying, oh, I wouldn't have roommates in college, you're spoiled. Don't do that. So again, and if you live in San Francisco and these numbers seem preposterously low to you, A, consider leaving, and B, consider, I don't know, adjusting them for your own circumstances. This is an example. It doesn't mean everyone is going to have this cost. So this is going to put you in the black by 14, 29, 35, $45,000 in the black at this point. So our graduate, right, is now at minus 40,000. He's 40,000 in the red, and our non-college graduate, thanks to a lot of frugality, is $45,000 in the black. So already at age 22, this guy is $85,000 better off than this guy. Here's the wild part, right? $45,000. If you have this invested in the S&P 500 and you return the historical average, we've talked about this on the channel a lot, returns roughly 7% after inflation. What does that mean? Well, using the rule of 72, that means it doubles about every 10 years. So if you're at age 22 and you've already saved up 45 grand over 4 years, which is possible if you are clever with your money and you're willing to hustle, and again, 30,000 a year, not much. Not to mention, if you're making these kinds of salaries, you're probably paying less in taxes than you're getting from the government. If we're honest, your taxes are going to be very low at that level if you have to pay anything at all. So $45,000 a year, or $45,000 saved up at age 22. If you live paycheck to paycheck beyond that, you did not invest another fucking penny. Oh, by the way, one other thing. If you have this and you start investing and saving at that level, that money will immediately drop your taxes. You can use I think it's the low income savers credit, earned income tax credit. In this bracket, the government's going to help you, whether or not you like it. But allowing this to double roughly every 10 years, this means at 22, you've got 45,000. At 32, you've got 90,000. At 42, you've got 180,000. At 52, you've got 360,000. And at 62, you've got 720,000 fucking dollars. In other words, you could be having your retirement completely set up and good by the time you're 22 years old. Now, obviously, you'd still have to retire at 62, but beyond this point, you could live paycheck to paycheck. As long as you just didn't touch this, you'd be just fine. And over a 40-year time frame, the S&P 500 has been remarkably consistent in terms of what it will return. The only variances on this, I mean, right, even if you want to cherry pick 1929, obviously you had the crash, but if you reinvest all the dividends, which companies were paying out by the shitload in the 30s, and that was during the years of, we had deflation in the 30s, that money, that reinvestment, the 1930s were actually not that bad to be an investor. They were bad, don't get me wrong, but the 1930s in some ways were a better decade to be an investor than the 1970s. And the reason is because in the 1970s, we had inflation. We also had several recessions. In the 30s, we had, in some years, deflation. The value of the US dollar got stronger. In the 70s, because of inflation, we were seeing 8, 9, 10, 12% inflation every year. Go ask your parents or your grandparents what gas lines in the Carter administration really looked like. It was ugly. Although, frankly, we could use high gas prices again. That's another rant. The point is, this is a really good idea, even if people will criticize you for it. As for our person with the degree here, so he's already $40,000 in the hole, but it can be reasonably assumed that this degree is supposed to get you something, right? And this, at this point, so we're now 40,000 and 45,000. I'm going to go ahead and erase all the math. Y'all have seen this because we're going to need these two numbers. So our opportunity cost is $85,000 for the degree, okay? But it gets worse than that for the degree holder, right? Because this person has saved in the S&P 500, has been clever with his money, maybe has been watching this channel. This person is actually 85,000 plus 85,000 times 1.07 plus the interest rate of that student loan debt. Let's be conservative and say it's a 3% subsidized loan. So now we're 1.1. In other words, he's $85,000 up plus an annual $8.5 thousand on top of that. This is where the difference between credit and debt comes in. So in other words, if this guy's making 30,000, what we were saying, just to get to level with him because of the way interest works, he's got to be at 38,500. Now, if you got a decent degree, you should be making a lot more than that. This is the difference between an engineering degree and a stupid degree. And not all non-engineering degrees are stupid, but generally speaking, if the degree ends in studies, it's a bad degree. Generally speaking, if the degree ends where the only career you can take from that degree is teaching that degree, it's a bad degree and you shouldn't get it. Frankly, I would call that a scam. So let's go on with this. Let's say he got, I don't know, what's the most generic? Business. Business is probably the most generic, middle of the road, mid degree. So let's say Mr. Young Businessman gets a job of $50,000 coming out, right? I think that's reasonable. $25 an hour, maybe be a young manager or something like that. Seems about plausible. So now this guy is making $50,000, right? And our non-degree fellow is making $30,000. You would say, okay, wonderful. 50,000 versus 30,000. This guy is making more, but he's got the treadmill of debt working against him. So automatically, I already talked about this. In effect, between his debt brings him back at 3%. It's going to bring him back, what's that, 40,000 times 3? That's going to be $1,200 a year. So that drops him to 48,800 out of the gate. And this invested at 7% is going to bring our friend here up about 5,000 or 6,000. So now it's only about a $10,000 delta. But over time, provided these people save their, are we talking finances? Yes, we are. That would be the general idea behind this. Over time, as long as these two stay the same, this $20,000 delta should be enough to cover, but you're gonna have to plot it out, right? So you go year 5, right? So if this guy's 40,000 in the hole, let's say these guys both move out and both spend about $20,000 a year. Year 4, they're still in their low 20s, they're still having roommates, they're still eating cheaply, as they should be. They're still very frugal, right? You're 22, roommates is just fine. Hell, if you're 22, living with mom and dad is just fine. I'd consider paying them something in rent, especially if they have a mortgage, help them out, help the family finances out. But in general, you should not be spending anywhere near as much as your salary in your 20s. Your 20s is the time to save. So let's say they're both bachelor lives, they're living on about $20K a year. And again, with these salaries, these are not New York or San Francisco salaries. For New York or San Francisco or some other high cost of living area, increase the salary numbers and increase the expense numbers accordingly, right? If you're not making $50,000 a year, you probably shouldn't be living in a place like New York or San Francisco. It just doesn't make sense. If you're already going to be making a low salary, move to a place like Cleveland or Columbia, South Carolina, and save your money. Yes, there is a new chat box. Need to be on financial audit with Caleb Hammer. Well, Neem, I'm a small fry YouTuber. if you want me to get onto a show like that, you need me. I need you guys' help to help build my channel, right? I refuse to run ads on principle, which means I rely on word of mouth. So it's up to you as to how far this channel goes. I can only do so much. Anyway, so we're gonna go with we're gonna go ahead and write, so salaries and then net worth, right? So here we go. So left is degree, right is non-degree. We're gonna split it up with dashes, all right? So this means at year 5, let's assume spending stays the same. Okay? Spending is the same. You can apply to be in the show. Is anyone on? All right, drop me the link in Discord, man. I'm very busy these days, though, so it may take some time to get there. Anyway, I think I should grow the channel before applying, though, because I really am kind of a nobody. But maybe, especially if I'm taking this retirement, it might not be a bad idea. That's just a pretty decent idea. All right. So let's go ahead and get back to where we were saying. Let's say, all intents and purposes, they're both spending $20,000 a year. Taxes are more or less going to be the same, right? This guy is going to have a lower salary, so he's not going to get taxed as much, but this guy's going to get student loan interest as a deduction and so on and so forth. You can quibble about the taxes. Let's just say this guy's saving $30,000 a year and this guy's saving $10,000 a year, right? So this guy's saving 60% of his income right now, which is fantastic. But realistically, again, Mr. Businessman, very often they're like, oh, I got a fancy degree. It's time for a fancy car and a fancy rental apartment. And all of a sudden they're living in deeper and deeper debt. So they're cool. Oh, I love Caleb Hammer. I don't watch him a ton just because I don't have time to watch shit on YouTube as much as I would like to. There are plenty of great creators out there, but yeah. Definitely send me, don't just send the website, send me the link to the application. Okay, so where we were saying. So let's just say this is at 3% is probably a bit conservative in these interest rate days. Let's say 5%. All right, and we'll say 7% for, and these are post-inflation, so 7% and 5% respectively for each of these. All right, so let's say this guy wants to hammer away at his student loan debt, which he should first. All right, so year 5, he's gonna make $50,000. He's gonna save $30,000 of it. So $40,000 times 5%, right? That's gonna be $2,000. So $2,000 towards interest, which means he's got $28,000 left to pay off the student loans. So let's say he does that. Absolutely crushes his net worth. He's still living with mom and dad for year 5. He's down to a minus 12K net worth. Let's go ahead and say the same thing happens here. So $45,000, right, multiplied by Will Jaramillo. I think you might be missing a few details on that. I'll get back to you on context. We're going to finish this exercise, and I'll explain that one in just a minute, so hang tight. This guy makes another $30,000 a year. Let's just say he doesn't get a raise, whatever. $30,000 a year, so he saves $10,000, but he's getting 7% from 45K. So that's going to be 4.5 times 7, which is 4, 9, 27, about $3,000. So he's going to get 58K net worth. So good for the degree guy, right? Degree guy, all of a sudden, is now only at a delta of, he was at a delta of 85K behind non-degree guy. Now he's only at a delta of 70K. It's going to take him a while to catch up. So let's go ahead and say we do this again. Let's say both of them get a nice little raise of about $5,000, okay? And they stay frugal. Again, year 6, right? This means these guys are 23 and 24 years old. They should still be very conservative with their money. You're the reason I started working out, so I hope you aren't retiring. I'm retiring from full-time work, my day job, okay? I'm not retiring from being a model, and I'm certainly not retiring from lifting. That is a lifelong journey. Anyway, so let's say he gets $55,000 a year, all right? And they keep their spending roughly about the same, 20 grand a year. And if you're wondering, I can't spend only on $20,000. I did it. I did it in Texas and I did it in South Carolina, okay? Especially with roommates, $20,000 a year as a bachelor is very much possible. And again, these guys are only at age 24, right? So now at $55,000 a year, our degreed fellow saves $35K. In other words, he pays off all of his student loan debt at the age of 24. Round of applause. That's pretty fucking good. All right. So now he's also pays off the $12,000. Let's go ahead and say with interest, it's going to be about $13,000 in total because he's still got to pay off the interest. So that leaves him, if he saves $35,000, drop 13 with $23,000 positive net worth. Let's say interest gives him a little bit. So he's got $24K net worth. Now our non-degreed fellow does the same thing, but he got a raise as well. And again, 6 years of work experience without a college degree, $35,000 is a very doable. That's reasonable. You can expect to get that much if you work hard and you're good at what you do and you find some kind of skill. Not every skill requires a degree. Just got a promotion at my job. Someone left from Walmart, started saving up for a FinDom Skype session that I need badly. Okay. Yeah, talk to me. We'll talk about that off of YouTube because I feel like too much of that talk on YouTube might get me suspended. Okay, so $35,000 a year. He's still saving, still spending only 20, so he's saving 15. So now he's getting 15,000 plus 58 times 0.07. So he's getting about $4,000 from his investments, okay? So that's going to be 58 plus 4 is 62, plus 15 is 77K net worth. So we see after year 6 that our degreed fellow has lowered the delta from 70K down to about 53K. Okay, let's do one more year. Let's go ahead and say each gets about a $2,000 a year raise this year, okay? So we say 57K a year and 37K a year. Again, these numbers are pretty reasonable. Let's make it a little bit more fun. They both bump their spending by 2,000, right? So it still says the spending goes up to 22,000. So it's going to be it's going to be 25,000 for this guy plus 24,000 times 0.07. So 24,000 times 0.07. It's going to be about 2,400, about 2,000 thereabouts, give or take. So he's going to be at about 50K net worth. Then the same thing here. This is going to be another 15,000. 77 times 1.07 is going to be about 5K. So it's going to be 82 plus 15. So this is going to be, and then this is going to be 5 plus 15, 82. It's going to be 97K net worth, and so on and so forth. You can see this goes down from 53 to 47. Eventually, if the salaries keep going up, eventually Mr. Degree Man is going to catch up to Mr. Non-Degree Man. But it's going to take well into their 20s, if not into their 30s, for their net worths to be equal. In other words, if this example is a good one, you need a substantial increase in your degree, in what you think your degree is going to get you in terms of a salary to even get close. Just for completion's sake, let's do one more exercise. So year 8. So this is going to be age 26 now. Let's say salaries remain the same, spending remains the same. Well, we'll bump it up to 60 and 40 respectively. All right, and we'll say that makes they each go to 25,000. So this guy's saving 35,000. This guy's still saving 15,000. So it's going to be 60K a year. 50K times the 7 over is 3.5. So it's going to be 53.5 plus 60K times minus 25, 35K. It's going to be 88.5K. And at year 8, this guy's 40,000 a year. And even if you're working as like a manager at a Walmart, 40,000 a year, by the time you're in your mid-20s, if you've been working there since you were 18, very doable, if you ask me. So this is going to be about 6.5K. No, yeah, it's about 6.5K plus 15. It's going to be 119K net worth. So it would probably be until about year 12. So at about age 30, Mr. Degree Man, assuming spending stays the same, finally passes Mr. Non-Degree Man. But again, this is assuming Mr. Non-Degree Man is not very good at making more money, and this assumes Mr. Degree Man is good at saving his money. Mr. Non-Degree Man will naturally save more of his money because he has less money to spend. Mr. Degree Man all too often gets invited out to business lunches and gets asked, oh, why do you still drive that old Corolla? Why don't you upgrade to a BMW? And so on and so forth. So you can see where I'm going with this, okay? I think apparently the whole FinDom YouTube channel is apparently no one knows what it is yet. I know what it is, but I don't, I mean, I'm very much down to do it. I just, the other thing is, right, so I work, I'm trying to become I'm currently competing for Mr. Supranational USA, and they do a whole judge of character thing. So it's like, I'm not sure that is something I want to have out in the open. We'll see. I don't think it would matter, but I like to be conservative. The point here that I'm trying to make is, right, you need to be doing this calculation anytime you go for a degree. And if you say, oh, that's too hard, it's going to take forever to plot it all out. Okay, fucker. You're talking about going to a university for 4 years of your life. What on earth are you talking about? This would take you, especially if you're not talking about it, 30 minutes tops to plot out and use Excel to get a graph. And if you don't know how to use Excel to get a graph, or even just use a whiteboard like this, you probably didn't pay much attention in high school or middle school, and you have yourself to blame for that. But the point I'm making is that this kind of calculation is the bare minimum you need to be doing to see what the return on investment of a degree is. The second thing you probably want to be doing is, what are the unemployment rates for holders of your degree? For instance, computer science used to be a very low unemployment rate and very high salaries. Now, with the tech recession, as Will Jaramillo has indicated, he's right, computer science, software engineering degree, they're dealing with some higher unemployment rates right now. Now, my degree was mechanical engineering. And the reason I like mechanical engineering and the reason I chose it was because the unemployment rate is low. Mechanical engineers can basically go any path out of college. Same with electrical. In almost any industry, you're going to want an engineer, both mechanical and electrical, to help optimize shit. You know, it can be HVAC, power plants, automotive, automation, you name it, you know, factory design, the loads of options. Same thing with electrical. Electrical's much the same way. Everybody kind of needs electrical engineers. The demand for those jobs isn't going away, and to a degree, they're at least somewhat automation proof. Not perfectly, but somewhat. I, for one, chose the nuclear industry because I really like nuclear power, and I thought that it would be worth doing. But factor in the unemployment rates too, because if you say, oh, well, I can get a $100,000 a year job, but the unemployment rate is 10%, ooh, you might be sitting in that unemployment line, and then ultimately, while you're waiting for that big job to come in, working at Walmart along Mr. Non-Degree. In fact, you're probably working for him. So be aware of that. Anyway. Who goes into debt for school and you spend your life on in FinDom? I currently have 2 credit cards maxed out because of it. All right. You need to write to me about your situation at askbullmuscle.com. I'm not going to FinDom you. What I am going to do is tear you a new asshole when it comes to managing your money, because that's fucking bad. You are, yikes. Come talk to me. That is, you are damaging your life almost irreparably at that point. So that you need to shape it the fuck up, buddy. So hopefully this was a good illustration of what you need to do. Again, adjust the numbers as you see fit. If you live in New York or San Francisco, adjust the numbers up. If you live abroad and you don't deal in American salaries, adjust the numbers down. Adjust expenses down, because $20,000 a year allows you to live like a king in a lot of locations where you can live at $10,000 or even $5,000 a year. But salaries are a lot lower. It's the same thing. It all scales. The point here that I'm really trying to make, biggest takeaways from this, okay? Number 1, you need to calculate opportunity cost when looking at a degree. Number 2, you must do a return on investment calculation. Number 3, you need to consider unemployment rates whenever you get that degree. Now, obviously, you can't picture what unemployment rates are going to be 4 years from now. But most engineering and STEM degrees tend to have lower unemployment rates than most bullshit degrees. Liberal arts, degrees that end in studies. You know what I'm talking about, right? Other good degrees, accounting is good, nursing is pretty reliable. Like, if you want to be a travel nurse, you will make stupid amounts of money. Your life will suck for those first few years, but if you do that and you stay frugal, you're going to do very well. But other options, right? If you want to be non-degree route, go work as a fucking roughneck up in North Dakota or in the Permian Basin in Texas. You'll make close to $100,000 a year. Now, as long as you're not an idiot like most roughnecks and buy yourself a jacked up truck, you're going to be retired before I was, and I'm only 29. So let's talk about this. All right. Will, again, write to me about this. I don't really want to talk about this on my stream. I'm trying to make a serious point about keeping your finances up, and I feel like talking about FinDom distracts from that. But write to me, askbullmuscle@gmail.com. Anyway, so as for the retiring thing, I'm going to make an entire separate YouTube video about it. It'll be a video. It's going to be it's going to be a video, like a recorded video. It is not going to be one of these live stream sessions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but I'll mention the details. When I say retirement, again, there's going to be full major posts, but this is a reward for people who have stuck around and watched this video this long. For those of you who don't know, I work for a federal agency, and Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency have offered a buyout to selected federal workers called the DRP. It stands for Deferred Resignation Program. I've elected to take it because my finances are such that I can afford to live on passive income, because I'm very good with my expenses. See my video for how to live inexpensively in a high cost of living area. This is the most expensive state in the union. Rent costs are almost as bad as California's, and food costs are a lot worse, okay? It can be done. You have to be clever about it, but right, on the bright side, there's no reason you need to own a car in Oahu, at least. If you live on the other islands, it's a different story. But if you live on Oahu, public transit is good enough, and more to the point, cycling, I mean, the weather is literal perfection here all the time. Why wouldn't you ride a bicycle? But where I'm going with this is you can bring your expenses down a lot more than people think you can. Not to mention, all your vacations are free. You live in Hawaii. You have the best beaches in the world and the best hiking in the world. There's a reason I adore this state, right? There's a reason I'm so stoked to be Mr. Hawaii for Super National. I went and hiked I went and did a little hike yesterday afternoon. Went up Tripler Ridge, hiking to, all right, I've been practicing this. Kaho'omoi Ihikapulani. That's the mountain. It's not next to the Stairway to Heaven, which is illegal, and I have not done it, and I'm probably not going to do it, but it is there. Federal employee who wasn't fired. Oh, fam, that's the other reason I'm taking this. Assuming not enough people take DRP. So my department, you can figure out what it is. Again, there's only one thing a nuclear engineer can do in Hawaii. Put two and two together to figure out what that is. But my department has publicly stated they want to cut headcount between 5 and 8%. Okay? So the first DRP was offered in January. That cut it to about 2%. That cut 2%. About 2% of the federal workforce took it. They're offering it a second time, I think, to get more federal workers to take it before doing an involuntary reduction in force. That's called a RIF. RIF is based on seniority. Since I've only worked this job for about a year, I'm very high up on the list of people who would get chopped. So to me, it's either I can take a guaranteed payout, which I would get full pay until September, or I can risk getting laid off. Right now, they say my current workplace is safe. I don't really trust SecDef Hegseth on that one. I think if they want to get to the cut numbers that I don't believe DRP is going to be enough. If they want to get to the cut numbers of 5 to 8% of headcount, they can't exclude my station of work. That's just my opinion. I could very much be wrong. For the sake of my fellow coworkers, I hope I am. But in taking DRP, I'd like to think in some small way I'm helping preserve jobs for those who need them here. I truly don't need the money thanks to savvy investing and low expenses. Not to mention with modeling, and hopefully I'm gonna, when I do this, I'm gonna start cranking out a lot more YouTube content. Hopefully we can start to monetize this a bit. I'm not going to run ads. I'm just not gonna fucking do it. I rely on you guys to spread the word. So that's more or less the gist of it. But no, when I say retired, I mean retired from full-time job. This is something I've been wanting to do since since college. So north of 10 years now, I've been wanting to retire early. And my goal was to retire before I turned 30 years old. I have achieved that. It's very liberating. It's a great feeling. I cannot describe it. I sacrificed a lot in my 20s to pursue what I think is the most important thing, and that is freedom. It's a big deal. Anyway, thoughts on Doge actually accidentally firing important workers dealing with nuclear. They fired NNSA Wombles. I wish they had kept them fired. I have nothing nice to say about the NNSA. At my old job, I worked directly for them, and they were speed bumps. They were worse than speed bumps. They were irrational speed bumps. They would demand everything be super, super safe with lots of backups. I don't know if I can use the official term. I think so. It's a functional classification that requires multiple redundancies and all these backup systems, and then would turn around and complain and say, and then they would say, we need startup to happen. We need to be able to do startup for this facility on the hottest day of the year, on the most humid day of the year, on the hottest part of the day, with all these ridiculous, like in a historic drought or a historic heat wave, with all these ridiculous parameters. And then they'd turn around when we came up with the design and say, well, why'd you make the condensate tanks for HVAC so big? Because you said we had to start it at 110 degrees, fucker. What are you talking about? Like, no shit. Yeah, the HVAC condensate tanks are going to be huge. You want us to start up at that kind of temperature? I mean, just for fuck's sake, let us start it at night. Idiots. No, I have nothing nice to say about the NNSA. I wish they had stayed fired. I have nothing nice to say about that agency. Frankly, I think a lot of the cuts Elon Musk and Doge are making, while very ham-fisted, are necessary. There is so much fat, waste, and bloat in our government that they're going about it in the dumbest way possible, but I understand why they're going about it that way, and those cuts need to happen. Desperately need to happen. They should have happened years ago. We haven't had a reduction in force in this country since 1996, okay? right? And that was under, in my opinion, the best president of our lifetime. That's Bill Clinton, of my lifetime anyway. And why do I think Bill Clinton's the best president of my lifetime? Budget surplus. All other arguments go out the window. By the way, the worst, in my opinion, was Bush Jr. Forgot, do you have a security clearance working nuclear in Hawaii? Yes. What level of clearance? I can't say that. I do have a clearance. I don't think I'm allowed to say which. I have had some very high clearances before. That's all I'm going to say about that. I don't think I'm supposed to say what specifically. I'd love to work at FBI, which is less clearance than CIA. It really depends on what role you're doing within what agency. Nuclear is weird. Department of Energy. So with Department of Defense, you've got secret clearances and top secrets and TSSCI, Compartment of Information, stuff like that. With the nuclear, you've got L level. If you're working Department of Energy, you've got Q level, right? This is where that unbelievably stupid conspiracy QAnon came from, is that Q was someone who had a Q clearance. It's like, that's not even related to deep state secrets. A Q clearance just means you're working on nuclear shit. That's all it means. Usually weapons, but not always. Could be research. It just... Conspiracy theorists dramatically overestimate the competence of the US government. It drives me nuts. Don't they help secure the literal button for our nuclear launch codes? No! That's what the Department of Defense does. So NNSA and Department of Energy work on creating the systems for Department of Defense to use. In terms of who presses the button, that's the generals, and that's, depending on whether or not he's been killed, the president. NNSA does for the weapons and military side what the NRC does for the civilian side. They pursue and enforce safety regulations around anything nuclear. Unfortunately, both the NRC and the NNSA have the same problem. They pursue safety at the expense of common sense. They demand so many backups, and they demand so much over-engineering for anything safety related and anything nuclear related that as a result, costs go through the roof and productivity goes through the floor. I really... Right. A great example of this is the US Navy. We have been running nuclear submarines in the United States Navy since the 1950s without a single fucking accident, okay? There's a good reason for that. The Navy is largely self-enforcing. The NRC and NNSA doesn't really mess that much with the Navy because the Navy knows what the fuck it's doing. You can thank Hyman Rickover for that. Go look up. You want a great story? A guy they should have ended Oppenheimer with Hyman Rickover going and talking to Oppenheimer to set up the naval nuke program. Different rant, but the point is NNSA and NRC are irrational. In a lot of the cases, they're not even scientists. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I really have a bone to pick with the way NRC, especially NRC, but NNSA as well, operates. Right, there are Cold War examples that show we do need them. Rocky Flats is a really great example. Go look up what happened at Rocky Flats. But the pendulum has swung so far to the other end where, God help you, if it is anything even the tiniest bit radioactive, even if the amount of radiation is less than you would get by, from eating a banana or a flight from here to Las Vegas, everybody loses their minds. It's like, bro, you have people smoking tobacco outside. That's more radioactive than any of the shit we're dealing with. What's wrong with you? I could go on and on and on about this, but eventually I actually do need to get going because I've been asked to help volunteer for Hawaii Bicycling League down at the convention center in downtown Honolulu, so I can't go keep doing this forever. They don't secure just still weird to me the president gets automatic all on highest security clearance. Theoretically, he boasts some random in the office. Yes, which is what Trump is. Or you could theoretically vote someone who has had foreign influence on them. I don't know if that's the case with Trump and Russia. I don't think it is, frankly, but it's plausible enough to warrant consideration. But that's the flaw in democracy. Any old idiot can win. Do I think Trump is an especially smart guy? No, I don't. Do I think people say he's literally funny mustache man? No, I don't. Do I think Trump will be a good president? No. His first term wasn't very good. Do I think Trump is the worst president in our lifetimes? No, I think that's Bush. Do I think he was the worst president of all time? Absolutely not. That's clearly James Buchanan. People get Trump derangement syndrome is very much real. And I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but Bill Maher actually said it well, where it's the opposite of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess Trump enamorment syndrome, where they almost treat him like Kim Jong-un from North Korea. And that's also really disturbing. He's a politician. He's a former billionaire turned politician. He's not really... People like to act as though he's either Satan incarnate or Jesus come back to earth, and he's neither. He's a below average president, is what I would call him. Weird that he pointed Tulsi. He's literally Putin simp. I have mixed feelings on Tulsi. I really dislike the current Russian administration, but at the same time, the holier than thou attitude from the Europeans can fuck right off, with one exception, and that would be from Poland, okay, and from Ukraine. Those two, they have legitimate complaints against us because we promised security protections in 1994 because Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal. And Poland, unlike most of Europe, actually was serious about building its own defenses. So Poland and Ukraine, and to a lesser extent the Baltics as well, I'll give the Baltics some credit, are exempted from this conversation. But it was Donald J. Trump that said in 2018 to the Germans, hey, you know, maybe you should stop thinking about just purchasing all of your natural gas from Russia. Maybe you should think about diversifying your energy sources. And the Germans were too holier than thou. They had their thumbs up their asses trying to shut down nuclear plants to buy more natural gas and burn more coal. Oh yeah, thanks a whole lot, Greta Thunberg. And I know Greta Thunberg is not German, but it's that level of green anti-nuclear idiocy in Europe that bothers the shit out of me. I'll give the French some credit there. The French have largely shielded themselves from such stupidity, but you cannot sit here and tell me that Europe was serious about its defense obligations, right? They've been living off of American largesse, the Western Europeans have, since 1946. And especially since 1991, right? It bothers the shit out of me to see a lot of our allies effectively start whining and complaining because the US is like, okay, Europe, it's time for you to defend against a European threat on your own. Not because we don't care, not because we're simping for the Russians, but because, hey, we have someone over in Beijing we need to fucking deal with. China, okay? The People's Liberation Army turns 100 in 2027. Go look at what Xi Jinping has said about what he wants to do in 2027. We got our hands fucking full, okay? Europe, happy, special, fun, live on American dime time is over. Follow the polls, because the polls understand what kind of threat Russia really is. Germany, I think you are the poster child for what not to do. The Belgians are bad at this. The Dutch are bad at this. The British aren't so bad, but in particular, yeah, Germany. Yeah, I get it, historical scars and such, and I'll say the same thing for Japan. Those need to end, okay? We've got aggressive authoritarian regimes looking to take sovereign land. We need you guys to contribute, especially considering what your export surpluses are. And thankfully, it's finally happening, but it should not have taken until 2022 for that to occur. Again, I will credit the Poles for being the poster child for what to do in terms of armaments and defense. Maybe it's because the Polish know how the Russians operate, because they've had to deal with their bullshit for hundreds of years. Anyway. Europe doesn't need Russia's oil. Europe does need France's nuclear. Why not copy Norway or Netherlands pushing EVs and bicycles? Where do you think the EVs get their power from, duh? Bruh, you need nuclear power for that. Europe is largely not a sunny place. Solar doesn't work that well. That's why Germany has some of the highest electricity prices in the world, even though they're trying solar so badly. If they just not shut down some of their nuclear plants from the last 15 years, they'd be a whole lot closer to energy independence from the Russians. And I'm not saying nuclear is perfect, it isn't. But compared to fossil fuels from a dictatorial, aggressive regime, nuclear might as well be manna from fucking heaven. Okay? It's not perfect, but no solution is perfect. Solar has its own problems. Apart from the intermittency issues, it takes rare metals to mine the solar panels. The solar panels eventually need to be replaced, and solar panels take up a lot of, sometimes very valuable, land. This is why Hawaii isn't powered by solar panels, even though we have some of the best solar intensity in the world. Between NIMBYism and between nuclear power being illegal here since 1973, Hawaii still gets about 75% of its electricity from imported oil, which is why electric costs are about 50 cents a kilowatt hour here. This is a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and it's part of why Hawaii is so distinctly unaffordable. I love this place, but some of the ways this state is managed are infuriating, and our energy source is one of them. Some parts of this, I will grant, are not caused by Hawaii itself. The Jones Act is distinctly unfair to us, as well as Alaska, Guam, and Puerto Rico, but there are a lot of things this state could do to handle the cost of living crisis a lot better than it is. But no, Europe absolutely needs large baseload electric power, and there just aren't enough large rivers to dam them up. Not to mention certain rivers, right, like the Danube and the Rhine, are massive for intercontinental trade. So with those ports being so far inland, building hydroelectric dams gets a lot more complicated. Mainly on strong towns, Charles, I love Europe from a housing and transportation perspective. Absolutely. And the Europeans, per capita, use a lot less energy than we do. We are dramatically wasteful and inefficient here. But that doesn't mean, right, Europe still has heavy industry, and especially with having to kind of re-up their defense industry, they're going to need more of it. Europe is trying to electrify all their automobiles. That creates electric vehicle demand. Europe is trying to build more train lines. While high-speed rail doesn't run on magic, yes, it's a lot more efficient than cars, but it still requires a shit ton of electricity to run. You need baseload electricity for that. That's where nuclear power comes in. What's nice is, yes, the biggest supplier of nuclear energy or uranium in the world is Russia, but there are friendly countries that, if they got their thumbs out of their asses and started letting the mining industry go to work, would be able to support both the United States and the European nuclear demand and an accelerated form of that demand. These two countries are Australia, which is starting to allow more mining, and our neighbors to the north. Oh boy, do I have some things to say about the Trudeau government. I'm so mercifully glad that fucker got elected, that got booted out of office. Trudeau was a national embarrassment. So good for y'all, Canada. I don't know what the results of your election are going to be, and I get why you're pissed off at us. You have every right to be, but of all the freeloading defense countries in the world, y'all are kind of the worst about it in terms of spending per GDP. Like, y'all said, yeah, maybe we'll get up to 2% of GDP by 2040. Really, Canada? Just go ahead and say we are your safety blanket, okay? Just be honest about it. Let's not beat around the bush. To quote, God, King of the Hill made this joke fucking 17 years ago. Canada, why would you want to visit a country that's actively dismantling its navy? How did that joke from King of the Hill age so well? Anyway, no, Canada, please, for the love of all that is holy, take the current Russian economic self-destruction to your advantage. Start mining for more uranium, my guy. I mean, this is such a painfully obvious thing to do. Will it cause some amount of environmental damage? It's mining. The answer is yes. However, I would argue Canadian mining standards are probably a whole lot cleaner than Russian ones, and I know they're certainly cleaner than the ones in Niger. Not to mention, these are good, high-paying jobs. Canada, you kind of want that. You want some uranium mining jobs? We have some uranium pockets here in the United States, but nowhere near as much as our neighbors to the north. For the love of God, Canada, please embrace common sense here. I really do love our neighbors to the north, but holy shit, y'all's government makes ours look good sometimes, and that is not a compliment. Anywho, I think that's all I got for today. To wrap things up, right? Don't pick a stupid degree. Do a return on investment of your degree. Don't forget opportunity costs, and do consider unemployment rates when you do and go and get a degree. I will be live again, same time, same place, tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's going to be a Pokemon stream. It's going to be real nice and chill. That will be the last stream I do before I go to Tacoma, Washington for a runway modeling show next week. I will not be live on YouTube during that time. Between doing the runway show and spending time with my family, no, sorry, I've got other things I want to do. I will be active on my Discord server and Instagram, of course. So if you want more of that, follow me on Instagram at cal_808 and check out my Discord. I'll go ahead and put the Discord link in the chat. So definitely go for that. Speaking of Canada-wise, Point Roberts, Washington, not part of Vancouver, BC, because we decided it would be the 49th parallel, and the 49th parallel cuts straight across like a knife, with the exception of Victoria Island and the Orcas Islands and the San Juan Islands. Go watch Oversimplified's video on the pig war to learn more about that. That's a good video. Oversimplified is a good channel. I like him. Hard to move to Europe. Disgusting rhetoric aside, I feel like Europe and Trump immigration policies are similar. No, they're not. They're absolutely not similar. We, over the last 4 years under Biden, had a much bigger illegal immigration problem than the Europeans have always had. And this is one where the left-wing media outlets just simply refuse to cover it. I'm not saying we don't need the immigration, but I am saying we need to overhaul our immigration system. It's fundamentally broken right now. We require immigrant labor in this country to keep our population stable, right? Our population is below replacement levels without immigration. Not to mention this country has been built on immigrants. Immigration is a huge part of what makes the United States special. We are able to handle immigrants better than almost any other country. Cultural assimilation, doesn't matter what your skin color is, doesn't matter who you are, as long as you're American, right? You can be very proud of where you came from or your individual culture. God knows I see that here. The ultimate melting pot is Oahu, right? I'm Haole, I'm a minority here. We are, I believe, the only minority white state. I think we're plurality but not majority Asian. Tons of Filipinos, Native Hawaiians, Polynesians of all kinds. So that's everything from Aotearoa, I believe I said that right. Sorry, New Zealanders, if I fucked that up. But speaking of badass cultures, Fijians, Samoans, God, Samoans, talk about people who, one, know how to cook, and two, you never want to scrap with. They make me look tiny. Marshallese, Micronesians, all of these Polynesian cultures here. We've got, I said Filipinos already, Portuguese, Chinese, Koreans, Vietnamese, Japanese, and then Haole, and I think Black is Popolo. I want to say that's right. There's a huge amount of diversity in this state, and there's no problems with it because we all see ourselves as American, right? Hawaii is the last state to join the Union, but when 1959 statehood addendum went out, it passed by a 93% to 7% vote, okay? This state is, in some ways, I would argue, it really is, in terms of what makes us strong, the best America has to offer. And as far as immigration is concerned, I'm generally pro-immigration, but we need to fix the system. Right now, we have it such that it's far easier to immigrate to this country illegally than it is legally. That needs to end. And in Europe, the problem is, right, here we're getting mostly immigrants from Asia and Latin America. For all of the issues that may come with that, in general, there is a shared understanding of the basic American principles. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property rights, individual freedom. separation of church and state, mostly. Whereas in Europe, you've got similar values being upheld, but immigrants are coming from the Middle East, where most of those countries are in large theocracies. And a lot of those Middle Eastern immigrants want to see more of a theocratic role, particularly with Islam, in these European countries, and that's causing a lot of social friction. We luckily don't really have that problem with most of the immigrants that come to the United States. That's our advantage. We should take advantage of that. However, if you want to come to the United States, yeah, you should probably learn English. Now, do I think English should be the only language officially spoken in the United States? Of course not. For instance, in Louisiana, it's English and French. Here, it's English and Olelo Hawaii, right? It's in Florida or Texas or New Mexico, you could make the argument for having Spanish as a secondary language. However, you should have at least a functional knowledge of English if you want to work in this country. That we should help citizens who are coming in to learn it. But yes, English is how we communicate here for the most part. This in New York, in the days of bringing your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning for freedom, you had Italian and Irish and Yiddish, right? Jewish communities, Slavic, all sorts, Poles, Romanians, Greeks, so whatever, Portuguese, you name it. And over time, you can learn the home tongue, but you learn English. My grandmother immigrated here in the 1940s from Germany. Yes, she saw some shit. And while she would occasionally speak German in the home, she made sure, no, you're Americans. She saw herself as American when she moved here. She married my grandfather, who was in the army, and she spoke English. She celebrated 4th of July about harder than anyone else because she understood what it was like to live without liberty. But she would still play the accordion. She would still, make apple strudel. She would still, she would still make sauerkraut and all sorts of other German dishes. She would still play Chopin on the piano. She would still bring a lot of German culture into the family, and those roots still trickle down today. There are still certain traditions that we do that come from my family's roots in Germany. But do I see myself as German American? Fuck no. I see myself as American. Simple, to the point. If you want to see yourself as hyphenated, I can't stop you, but I certainly don't feel that way. Maybe that's because I'm a military brat. Anyway, I'm rambling. I need to get some food in me because I am starving. I got me some protes. Going to run another fantastic calorie deficit today, and I'm going to ride my bike down to Hawaii Convention Center. So if you're watching this and you want to meet up with me, I will be in downtown Honolulu for more or less the rest of the day. That is it for me today. I will see y'all tomorrow, 9 a.m. Hawaiian, 3 p.m. Eastern. I believe that's like 9 p.m. Central European. I'm sorry if you live in Asia. That's all I'm going to say about that, because that's a hard... One of the downsides to living here is that no matter what time you stream at, you're screwing over some part of your audience by default. Thoughts on the EU loophole? For 500,000 euros, you buy Maltese citizenship, which gets you EU citizenship. That's great if you can afford it. I would rather save that $500,000, keep it invested in what I think is still the greatest country on earth, and continue to prosper here. I love Europe. There's nothing wrong with Europe. I love the tons of different cultures there and all the different languages, and the history is fantastic. But I would never, ever want to be born in any other country. Never. I am a proud American to the core. It is a huge part of my identity. I want to live in the Netherlands. I love their bicycles. Good for you. I live in Honolulu. Is the cycling infrastructure remotely where it needs to be? Fuck no. Do I make it work? Yes, I do. I would rather live nowhere else. God bless America. That is it for me today, y'all. I'm going to go and get ready for that. If you want your own consultation, write into me at askbullmuscle@gmail.com. Okay? As always, make good, decisions. Those good decisions form your actions. Those actions form your habits. Those habits form your values. And those values form an ethos that can be the guide star through the rough waters of life. Much love. Come in for the hug. Oh, my holy mother of God, I am sore. Ha ha ha. Okay, so I hit deadlifts and hiking yesterday, and I am feeling it in my legs. Biking down to Honolulu is going to be fun. Shoots, y'all. If you want more, check out the Discord or write me on Gmail.